Shifting back to climate, you recently declared a climate emergency. You've called them the first steps in your effort to build back better. Forgive me, with a layperson's hat on here, what does the emergency framing actually allow you to do that you couldn't before? Is it more symbolic, or does it actually translate into faster decarbonisation? And I ask you that because I wonder why others aren't going this way, as the UN Secretary-General Guterres hopes they will.
A number have. We are certainly by no means the first nation to do this. A number have. And I think what we're essentially flagging is that, at least in New Zealand, for the most part, climate emergency or declarations of emergencies tend to be left to civil defence emergency, floods, severe weather events. What we're flagging here is that actually climate change is inextricably linked with these issues. They do exacerbate those issues for which we often do declare national emergencies. And so it's acknowledging the urgency of the issue. It is, however, just that, a declaration. We coupled it with a plan around decarbonisation of our public sector, but it also must be attached to a comprehensive approach. We, for instance, are one of those few privileged countries where the majority of our emissions comes from agriculture, well over 40%. The low-hanging fruit of energy generation and transport for us is a bit different than for most nations. So we're really, I think, at the forefront of having to determine how can we be a food-producing nation and yet reduce our emissions at the same time. So we are very focused on the research and development. We are amongst the first nation to commit to pricing our agricultural emissions, because we know if we can find our way through on food production and the threat it poses for climate change, then we can demonstrate a path through for other countries where once they deal with their low-hanging fruit, they'll be looking at food production as well. Okay,
President Sanchez, on this issue, you among all the others have talked about a green recovery. My question is this, though: a focus on net zero targets for 2050 is one thing, but what about now? What about next year? If we can reconvene a year from now, what can we expect to have done over the next 12 months?
Well, I think the most important thing is to that people understand that this ecological transition means jobs, prosperity, enterprises, and let's say opportunities for all. I think it's crucial for all of us to create an integrative perspective of the ecological transition. And this is the challenge that we're facing also in Spain, where different territories within Spain are touched by this energetic transition, and we have to explain and engage companies in order to create opportunities in these territories. So my political goal is always explain people that ecological transition, energy transition means jobs, prosperity, economic growth.
Are we, President Michel, are we seeing enough from governments to prioritize and fund climate-related research and development? What, in terms of the funds, and in terms of trying to woo the private sector as well, are we seeing enough in this space?
The first point is to give a clear signal, to take a clear orientation. At the European level, what we have decided a few months ago and confirmed last week, the fact that we will mobilize 1.8 trillion euros during the next years. This is a very strong signal, and 30% at least of this amount will be dedicated to our green ambitions. Point one. Point two, I think that we need a new paradigm. I mean, the last decades we have developed our economies through the exploitation of the natural resources. And now we consider that we need new resources. And for example, the circular economy is something which is very important in the future, because it means that something which was seen in the past as a waste is now a product, is now a resource. And the same at the digital level. The digital data is the new resources on which we need to base our economic development in the the future. It means a totally new approach in comparison with the past. We took very strong decisions in Europe, climate neutrality that we have decided 1 year ago, and 2 days ago when we took the decision to increase our common goals by 2030.
Okay, President Michel, thank you. President Duque, just a quick word from you on the climate piece. It's clearly a critical issue for you as well, given what's going on next door, given what's going on with the rainforest. How prepared are you to stand up to some of the climate deniers, some in your close proximity?
Well, I think we have to be always based on scientific research. But let me say something very clear. Colombia only represents 0.4% of all the CO2 emissions worldwide. But we're one of the highest vulnerable countries on the effects of climate change. So that's why we have made very clear commitments. We have said we want to reduce CO2 emissions 51% by 2030. We have also said we want to become carbon neutral by 2050. But we have also said 2 very important things. One is that we're going to pass from 0.2% of our energy matrix based on non-conventional renewables to more than 14% in the next 2 years. And we have also said that we want to plant 180 million trees by August 2022. We're going to close this year with 50 million trees that are already been planted. And we have called the private sector to participate in a circular economy policy with the idea of producing, conserving, and conserving, producing. And we want all individuals in Colombia to be highly conscious on how to reduce the individual footprint in terms of CO2 emissions. And that's why we have also concentrated on an education platform that calls the people to use, recycle, reduce, and also to be able to connect every single activity in reducing the individual footprint. With that, I think Colombia wants to play a key role, a leadership role in Latin America. And let me say something. That's why we have also called countries to participate in the protection of the Amazon and high-altitude ecosystems, because these are ecosystems that are much needed if we really want to make an important effort to contain climate change effects.
All right, thank you very much. President von der Leyen, the Green New Deal, I said I was going to come back to this. You know, I asked President Macron whether leaders, including himself, were doing enough to level with their electorates about what's really at stake here. I talked to President Sanchez about what can be done in the next 12 months rather than throwing it ahead some decades. I'd be interested to hear your response on both of those things. Are European countries, not just European countries, many countries around the world, are they doing enough? Are they being honest enough? Are they being clear enough with their electorates about what's at stake and the sort of change that really needs to happen pretty much across every sector? A war footing, I think the ICCP called it, is needed.
I think we all know that we have to be more ambitious because this climate crisis is so huge, and the time left before we reach tipping points is so short that we all know that speeding up and being more ambitious is absolutely necessary. And therefore, for example, next year, we're coming with a whole set of new regulations that are detailing out how we're going to reach the goal we've set ourselves with decreasing 55% of CO2 emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. So we have to really be transparent on exactly measuring also that we are reaching our goals. And here, this is an enormous effort for the whole world. And the time that is left is short. We have a decade, perhaps, to really improve things. Otherwise, we're reaching tipping points, and then a vicious cycle starts. And therefore, everybody has already an idea what is going on if you look at the extreme weather phenomena, for example, the droughts and the floods and the fires. But this is just the beginning, and therefore, it's urgent.
Okay. Couple of other bits and pieces I want to touch on before we wrap this up. I've got to ask you a question on Brexit, President von der Leyen. I understand no one wants to be the first to walk away from the table, but realistically, you've been talking for a year now. You've been having the same conversation on the same issues. What gives you reason to think that something can be pulled out of the bag here?
Well, first of all, there's movement. That is good. And the transition period ends. So we're talking about new beginning with old friends, but we should also be clear from the 1st of January on, and this is in 3 weeks, the UK will be a third country to the European Union. And what we have sorted out such a package already in the agreement, but what is essential now to finalize the one and only important question, that is, if the UK wants a seamless access to the single market, and the single market of the European Union is the largest one in the whole world, they are welcome. But they either have to play by our rules, because this is a matter of fairness for our companies in the single market, or the other choice is there's a price on it, and the price is quota and tariffs. And this is what we are just sorting out at the very end.
Should we read into these prolonged discussions that negotiators have not yet exhausted all options?
Exactly. We're on the very last mile to go. But it's an essential one, and we want a level playing field. We want a level playing field not only at the start, but also over time. And this is the architecture we are building. And we are fine about the architecture itself, but the details in it, do they really fit? And these are crucial points, because again, it's a matter of fairness. It's a matter of fair competition, and we want to ensure that.
Okay, President von der Leyen, thank you. Look, we're running out of time. I'm told we've only got a few minutes left. A couple of things I want to finish with. First, and Prime Minister Arden, let me put it to you. Have female leaders been better at rallying their voters to combat this pandemic than their male counterparts? I know you've been asked this on a number of occasions. What are your thoughts? Very briefly, and I'd like to hear everyone else's as well.
Do you know, I don't know how well placed I am to answer that question. I'd love for us to be in a position where we're instead just analysing different styles of leadership rather than seeing it as necessarily gendered. All I can say is that I'm not an epidemiologist. I do not have a background in infectious diseases. I've always been willing to humble myself to this role in this position, and in doing so, take the advice of experts in the field. And there's been no better demonstration of why it's so important for us to listen to an evidence base than a global pandemic, where we literally were learning alongside one another. And so I'd like to think that our approach in New Zealand has been one both where we've been evidence-based, but as I said in the beginning, where we also focused on a wellbeing approach that actually said flattening the curve is not enough for us. A flattened curve in New Zealand would have meant a high mortality rate, and that wasn't tolerable to us.
Yep. Okay.
So maybe that's gendered leadership, or maybe that's just leadership.
Does anyone else want to say anything on this? President Sánchez. Not to put you on the spot.
I completely agree with Jacinda. I think that you need to face this huge challenge with humble. You have to be humble. You have to be transparent in the information. You have to base your decisions on science, and of course try to build up unity among political parties, among, of course, society.
Okay, President Duque, did you put your... Yeah, please, come on in.
I'll say something briefly. At the beginning of the pandemic, what we saw was a lot of demagoguery saying that there was a dilemma between protecting the health system and protecting the population and vis-a-vis the economy. I think what we have all seen is that both things have to be on a balance. What we can tell from our experience is that we have been able to work along in expanding the ICU capacity, the testing capacity, the tracing capacity, the isolation capacity, and at the same time, being able to recover the economy in a safe way. We're now at 92% of recovery rate. And I think we want that to continue. And the only way that this can work along is not just the government making decisions, but also the behavior of the population. And I should say the Colombian people have behaved very well so far, and we want to keep them very much aware that this is not over yet, and that we need to keep on recovering with the population being acknowledgeable of social distancing, the usage of masks, and at the same time avoiding multitudes.
All right. Look, I want to thank all of you. I do want to get a final comment from you, Secretary General. We've touched on a number of issues we haven't been able to touch on. But give us your overall thoughts. And actually, let me pose it to you with this question. And it's delicate, and I have to be diplomatic here. But I wonder what it says about leadership when competence, when doing the job, is held up as exceptional in these times, or comes across as exceptional in these times. What does that say about leadership?
Well, it says that we're not having Ursula today because she's in Brussels, because she is going the last mile, going the last mile, and we hope she's going to get a deal. She's Charles Michel and Ursula have done a lot of things in the last few weeks, in the last few months. But of course, this is one very important. I have to say, when you're talking about leadership, here you have Jacinda Ardern, who just had the well-being budget approved. A budget all based on well-being. Well, that is an initiative. That is something new. That is original. But also, she got it done, and it's happening. With President Duque, we're going to sign a little later in the day. We're going to sign virtually an agreement to support the reform program of Colombia. Again, you're moving in a direction in which you're going to the you're going to the reforms as a fundamental question. So reform all the time. Here, I want to say that when the world got together, when Europe got together to deal with a package, with the 750 and the, which was grants and which was, that was, for me, looking from the outside and not being European, the single most important moment in terms of European unity and European integration going forward. And here we have Charles, who was critical about that. And of course, Mr. Sanchez, President Sanchez, who not only chaired our ministerial council meeting, but also was the one who has been pushing the question of social protection, make everything in the guise of not only green, but also more inclusive, the question of inclusiveness. So I would say this is a kind of exercise, together with President Macron, who just left, multilateralism, climate. I would say these are the type of, this is the leadership that we're following. This is the leadership that we're serving.
Secretary General, thank you very much indeed for those closing thoughts. President Duque, Prime Minister Ardern, President Michel, President von der Leyen, and President Sanchez. I mean, getting all of you to talk on one panel is a feat in itself. So given how busy you are, hopefully we've stirred some thoughts. Hopefully we got some news out of this as well. And thanks again to President Macron.
Jacinda, it's also 1 o'clock in the morning, I think, in, yeah. 1 o'clock in the morning in New Zealand. So thank you very much.
We will let you all go now. Thank you very much indeed to all of you. Thank you.